Hello and welcome to the FitBoss Podcast, where we explore the connection between physical health, mental resilience, and the way we live and work. In this episode, I'm joined by Ciarán Avitabile. After 2 decades in corporate leadership, Ciarán hit a breaking point that many professionals will quietly recognise. Chronic stress, burnout, and a growing disconnection from both himself and the people around him. Now, what followed was a forced reset and a complete rethink of success, leadership, and balance. In whatever situation you find yourself in, I hope this conversation helps. Thanks for listening. Ciarán, welcome to the FitBoss Podcast. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks, Ross.
Look, you have a really interesting story that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people, not least of which because with all that's going on in the world, you know, whether it's AI reshaping jobs, economic uncertainty, or even, you know, global conflict, couple that with the general pace of life, you know, I think stress and anxiety levels with a lot of people seems to be on the increase. And your story, I think, will touch on something that a lot of professionals probably struggle with quietly. And that is around kind of burnout, health, and ultimately trying to kind of redefine, I suppose, what balance and what success actually looks like to you. So look, for people meeting you for the first time, you know, it'd be great to, if you could start by giving them a bit of background on, you know, the journey that's kind of led you to where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, Ross. It's a pleasure to reconnect and share my story. I guess first and foremost, if I was to introduce myself, Ciarán, I'm a husband, I'm a father. I have spent 20 years in corporate. That journey and that career, I guess, was stopped when I had some health issues that we'll go into, I'm sure, today. And ever since then, I've kind of been navigating, kind of figuring out what I want to be when I grow up. But probably important to what we were discussing or your introduction is that, you know, I had to take 6 months off because I had an incident. I was out running with my friends and I suffered a mini stroke. So that meant that I had to pause as I was going through some medical checks for a period of about 6 months. And then I kind of, that was the catalyst for me changing my life or my lifestyle or where I invested my time and my energy going forward.
Take me back to even before that happened then. So what was your career like? Obviously, you started off in consultancy, you were in sales, high pressure jobs. What was that kind of, I suppose, growth trajectory like? And how did that kind of accumulate over time? You know, obviously, it's very different when you're in your, let's say, in your 20s. Probably have a bigger capacity, but then you get a family, you've got kids, you've got responsibilities. Just walk me through that kind of journey that led to you're out on that run.
Yeah, I was afraid you were going to call me old there for a second, Ross, but,
no.
But when I was younger, so I started in Accenture. So as you said, I started in consultancy, and that was a conscious decision at the time because I always kind of thought or expected or knew that I was going to end up in sales, right? It was something that always attracted me. But I did think about consultancy was the fastest way to gain the most amount of skills or the widest skill set possible. Working with different customers on different projects in different roles across different industries. So I joined Accenture and that was a phenomenal number of years. But again, after I think it was about 2.5 years, I decided, okay, I think I need to actually start into the area that I want to develop my career in, which was sales. And that's where I started my trajectory in sales. So initially I actually worked in the agri business, working for a meat producing firm in Ireland, selling meat to the Italians. But obviously quickly transitioned into tech with Salesforce.com. So Salesforce was really where I learned everything around outbound sales, where we met as well. And then from there, I joined Viva, which was a business who built a vertical solution for life sciences on the Salesforce.com platform. So it was in the ecosystem, let's say. But again, I was focusing in on an industry. And that was really where I experienced that career trajectory, right? I got amazing opportunities at Viva, joined as an individual contributor. Within 1.5 years, I think I got into leadership, and that was something that I was very keen to do. And ended up after I think about 7.5 years in that business as the VP of sales, running sales for across EMEA. Amazing time, had fantastic, made fantastic connections, lots of friends, right? My circle of friends still very much overlap with some colleagues and ex-colleagues from Viva, but decided to move on there because my responsibility was across EMEA and I wanted to experience a global role, basically, right? So I wanted to run a sales team across the globe, be ultimately responsible for the number and the performance of that team. So that's when I joined Techro, an Irish scale-up in the clinical space. And again, I think to go back to your specific question, consultancy, high growth at Viva in terms of career, and then obviously the responsibility, the level of responsibility at Techro. I think what I didn't realize at the time is I was layering stress and responsibility over stress and responsibility. My character, I tend to seek that responsibility. I think I'm quite ambitious as well, so that didn't help, because instead of noticing and realizing and maybe slowing down when I need to slow down, I kept pushing, right? So for those nearly 20 years, I was pushing pretty hard. Yeah. And basically it got to the stage where on that run, as I said, the body eventually said no. The interesting thing, because you specifically asked me, what happened before that, is probably for a period of 2 or 3 years, I knew that things weren't great. And I remember talking to friends about pains in my chest. I was having forgetfulness episodes. I would like pay for something and walk away without taking my credit card. I walked out of restaurants and bars, leaving my phone on the table, like silly things, I left my laptop on the flight as well. And I remember commenting to Olga, my wife, to say, I really hope I'm not doing some long-term damage to myself. So somehow I knew, but I didn't want to accept it or admit it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That was interesting. I was actually going to say, was there any telltale signs? Because it's always 2020 when you're looking back. It's like, if I connected that dot with that dot with that dot, I might have ended up in a slightly different place. But as I said, you can't kind of beat yourself up too much either on that.
I tell the story with a friend of mine. We were driving into the office one day, and one of us, which is strange because the whole problem is that we don't open up, right? And that's probably another thread or road we can go down. But one of us brought something up about chest tightness and other reactions that we were having related to stress. And I remember laughing and joking about this driving into the office, right? And kind of saying, I wonder which one of us will have a heart attack first. And it was very much bravado. It was very much joking. But like looking back now, I'm going like, this is one of my best mates. And, instead of kind of stopping and saying, hey, if I'm not going to look after myself, at least saying, hey, dude, that's not good. That's not normal, right? You need to check that. We laughed and joked about it. He laughed at me, I laughed at him, and we joked about how, we're so stressed and what this is doing to our health.
And what kind of advice would you give to people then that are in the trenches of that probably can't see the wood from the trees? Because if I think about even your role, right, the pressure dials up in increments. And I mean, you've always had a sort of health and fitness as kind of an outlet. Like you've struck me that you've always kind of done that. So you probably thought, maybe I'm blowing off the steam, I'm getting rid of the stress by getting some exercise done. But that may not necessarily have been the case, where it was still kind of building. Like how did the stress evolve as your roles grew bigger? And what advice would you kind of give to people to sort of keep an eye on it when right now they're probably in the trenches and they don't realize that the temperature has just been dialed up to nearly boiling point on them?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. There's a couple of things there. You mentioned, right? It builds up little by little, and what happens is that we normalize it, right? So stress is increasing. Because we never reset it, it stays at this level, and this becomes our new normal. Then when it increases a little bit, that's how the normal happens, right? And, without getting too technical, we talk about chronic stress or acute stress. Acute stress is actually good. It's for survival. So something, danger happens, we spot it. And that acute stress is what allows us to react to it, right? Fight or flight. So back in the day, it was pure survival, right? Animal, tiger, whatever it is comes, we run, right? The problem that we're dealing with today is more the chronic stress. So it's constantly humming in the background. And not only it's constantly humming in the background, because we're never resetting it, that becomes the new normal, as I explained, and that new normal builds. When you're in that situation, Ross, as you correctly said, you don't notice it, right? Yeah. You don't notice it. And also, let's be honest about it, especially if you have the character where you have that ambition, you don't mind working hard, you enjoy the push, you enjoy the thrill. You also don't want to admit that to yourself. So you might, like we were, right? We were in the car with this friend of mine. We can't say that we didn't know that we were stressed, right? But we joked about it, right? So and also I think to a certain extent is, well, what can I do? I can't stop, right? This is what I'm supposed to do, right? There's this conditioning in our mind. But the big thing, because I do work from a coaching capacity now with leaders, and one of the things we work on is nervous system regulation, right? Around the stress management, and how do I make sure that even if I'm in this stressful scenario, environment, situation, how can I still perform at my best? And one of the first things that we talk about is awareness, right? So awareness is different to knowing that I'm stressed, right? Really becoming aware of that. But the problem that we have is that awareness will only come with stillness. So we have to have moments of stillness, moments of reset. Some people call it meditation. Some people will call it breath work. There's whatever it is, but just literally sitting still. One of the big things as well is the way the brain works is that there's a part of our brain that takes about 10 to 15 minutes of stillness or potentially even boredom to come online. And that is the part of the brain where we do critical thinking, where we can break down complex scenarios, solutions, where creativity increases. But the problem is that we never are still enough to be bored for 10 to 15 minutes. Right, so the reason why I bring and the reason why I bring that up is because that awareness, so having the ability to sit still and just kind of be aware of what's happening within my body, because it's the body, it's not the mind. We spend most of our time up in the mind, is important for your health, but it's also important for your performance. Because as I said, if I can think more critically, if I can break down more complex problems, if I can be more creative, it's not only going to help me to manage my health, it's going to help me to be better at my job.
That makes sense. To what degree do you think organizations have a responsibility to create that space or to even encourage that conversation? Because I mean, you see it, especially with the job market the way it is at the moment. Like, I just constantly hear stories about the pressure just being dialed up all the time, because it's a bit of an employer's market out there at the moment. How would you advise somebody to maybe broach that conversation, either with their manager or, with HR or, whoever? Maybe they have a mentor in the company where they can say, do you know what? Something's going on here. I can tell, I'm getting anxiety where I normally wouldn't have got anxiety or whatever. What role are companies responsible for playing as part of that conversation?
Yeah, what my personal opinion is, yes, they should, Ross, right? Yeah. And, we run also a leadership coaching business where we have a leadership coaching program. And, we touch upon these and we try to make those leaders aware and responsible, right? Not just for their own health, but also for that of their teams, right? We say that that's part of being a true leader. The reality is that things are improving and things are moving in that direction, but we're still not quite there yet. I mentioned just before we came on that I was in the US this week. I stood in Times Square, right? Did the tourist thing for an hour or so, and I was looking around, and one of the advertisements on the big massive screens in Times Square was an organization with a quote from someone that said it was for people who were suffering and dealing with cancer. And the quote was from a cancer survivor that said that work helped her to get through her cancer.
Wow.
Now, I might be biased, right? But we know that stress, and particularly work-related stress, is one of the biggest factors for the explosion of cancer nowadays.
Yep.
I don't believe that work helped that person get through, right? That is a message that an organization is trying to pass through to say is someone who doesn't work is not productive. And in today's society, if you're not productive, you're not valuable. So
Gotcha.
I'm now going to tell you that actually, if you've got cancer, work harder, work more, keep working. Because actually that's going to keep your brain busy and that will help you get through your health issue. I don't believe that's true, right? But that's a very personal opinion. And I completely lost my trail of thought.
No, you're fine.
Your question triggered that.
It was the responsibility of the corporate world to facilitate that
so
conversation.
That's probably a good example to we're not quite there yet, right? Because they're not taking responsibility for it. I also will say is that, I actually left an organization. When I left Viva, one of the things was, I'm struggling with this stress, I'm not going to be able to manage it, my current role, the environment, whatever. When I went to the new company, nothing changes, right? Things improve for about 6 months. So I was the problem, right? So I also will always tell clients is that, we need to take responsibility, right? We cannot outsource it. We cannot wait for the corporate world to catch up. So I'll just open another little tangent on that because I work with leaders and I actually do nervous system regulation specific coaching, right? So most of the people come to me for business or leadership coaching, but with some people I work specific on nervous system regulation because they come to me saying, I am stressed, I need to manage it, I can't deal with this anymore, I feel completely detached. So when we do that work, typically people, and it's not because I do anything special, but I'm giving them the space to breathe, to increase their awareness. So when they come out the other side, they're there, wow, that's amazing. I wish everybody could do this and I wish we could all do it in the company. So I say, well, let's do it, right? Let's do it with your team, bring me in, let's look at it. And there's a resistance. So the leader will willingly admit that they're stressed and they will willingly admit that breathwork, meditation, all these practices help their stress. They're still not quite ready to walk back into the rest of the leadership team to say, hey guys, I think we should do for the performance of this business? Let's get a breathwork coach in here. It's just, we're still not quite there, right?
So that's reputational vulnerability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can maybe go a little bit deeper in that, but I do want to make sure that I answer your question is, the first and simplest thing that I ask people to do is if you do nothing else, just sit still for 2 or 3 minutes in the morning. Close your eyes if you can, and that's purely just to remove any external distractions, right? You don't have to sit in the lotus position, you don't have to do anything that sounds too woo-woo, but just notice what's happening. Notice how you're breathing. Notice where the tension in your body is, right? Notice any tingles, anything that's happening, anything that you're too busy because you're in your head during the day. Just try and bring your attention to your body and see what's happening there. 2 or 3 minutes a day in the morning. Now, in an absolutely ideal scenario, I'll also ask you to do that around lunchtime and then again in the evening. And the reason is because of the chronic stress, all we're doing is that we're giving the nervous system that little reset. If we can bring it down into reset, then we're much readier for what's coming after later in the day. So instead of being straight across, our nervous system will be reset, hike, reset, acute.
So you're making it acute rather than chronic and systemic.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
Our nervous system never quietens because of the chronic stress. So all we need to do is every so often just give it that opportunity to quieten. Because until that quieten the nervous system will quiet the mind, or some people will say quiet the mind to quiet the nervous system. And that's when you start to notice what's really going on. And your body will tell you, believe me.
Yeah, no, I fully believe that. It's funny that you should mention that because I found myself doing that just, I suppose, kind of accidentally. Where, you've got so many different things, so many balls in the air, so many plates spinning.
Yeah.
And when you start to go on that precipice where it's like, okay, this is getting overwhelming now, to sit back, and I end up taking a conscious deep breath, and I nearly like, Jesus, was I forgetting to breathe because I was so bloody busy? Do you know, like it feels like your chest is nearly heavy at that time. And then once you do that stillness, then all of a sudden the fog lifts and you have that little bit more clarity then, right? You can go, okay, let me divide this up into buckets, that. Okay, I'm going to do this for the next hour, then that. And it just, okay, now I know what, now it's nearly like now I have a compass. Now I know kind of where I'm going in this. But it's not been I kind of stumbled across that accidentally. Whereas what you have is a lot more programmatic, you know, and it's something I'd definitely be interested in looking into in more detail.
Yeah. Can I just pick up on something you said?
Sure.
Because you said it nearly felt like I forgot to breathe.
Yep.
You potentially actually did forget to breathe, and I'll explain what I mean by that, right? So
Sure.
the nervous system, as I said, when it goes into fight or flight, what's the first reaction, right? When you get a fright or when something dangerous happens,
Yeah.
right? And then we hold our breath. The nervous system cannot distinguish between life danger because a tiger is coming at you or an email from your boss that really triggers you or you're up against a deadline, right? So it goes into fight or flight. So in that moment where you're saying that you could be foggy, you're stressed, you're under pressure, the chances are that you will find yourself holding your breath. We're just not aware that we're doing it. But now that you're conscious, so you said you noticed it, so you started to be a little bit more conscious about it. Just notice that, right? Whenever you're under pressure, you'll find yourself holding your breath.
Which is the opposite of how you're going to reset yourself.
The opposite of what you're going to say. And you talked about taking a deep breath, which is fantastic. But what I would say what's even more important is just make sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale. So when we inhale, our heart rate naturally accelerates. And when we exhale, our heart rate reduces.
Okay.
So slows down. And that's why we talk about heart rate variability, right? And a healthy heart is one that has high variability. Boom, 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 boom. You know, it's not constant all the time. So by extending your exhale, you slow down your heart. By slowing down your heart, you reset your nervous system and you quiet your brain.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting. That's
I could go on a big tangent on breathwork here, right? I'll give you just one more little anecdote.
Yeah,
the more we're breathing when we're in fight or flight, and the more it's like, or we breathe up into our chest, we're mouth breathing. If we feel that we're under pressure, the less oxygen we deliver to our organs, including our brain. And the interesting thing is that when you feel that you need more oxygen and you gasp for air, or the deep breath that you talked about, if you don't couple that with the extended inhale, what's actually happening is that when you exhale, you're dumping carbon dioxide, CO2. That carbon dioxide is the gas that a lot of time it's seen as a waste gas, but that gas is what is allowing the oxygen to decouple from your blood and get delivered to your organs, including your brain. So actually, the more carbon dioxide we maintain in our body, the more oxygen we deliver to our brain. So I'm going to tell you something that says the less you breathe, the more oxygen you deliver to your body. Now that sounds counterintuitive. Why? Because of the stress the chronic stress and the mouth breathing, the receptors in our body have become more sensitive to carbon dioxide. So we can tolerate less carbon dioxide in our body. So things like breath holding and different breathing patterns that I work with people on, even from a sports perspective to improve your sporting performance, can actually help with clarity, thinking, cognitive ability, and therefore can help you as a leader, as a business person, as whoever it is in your everyday life. I joke, we delivered a session for a community of leaders last week, and I said that within 2 or 3 minutes of breathing, I can make you smarter. Because we train you to deliver more oxygen to your brain, and therefore that's where clarity starts to happen.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. You know, it's funny because from the personal training perspective, we talk to people about how they breathe, but it's mainly from the perspective of how they're bracing. So are they breathing in through their abdomen, or are they just letting their chest go up and down? Yeah. Right? Or do they have that kind of internal pressure to be able to brace against so that you can protect your back when you're actually doing exercises? But we haven't explored with them the kind of the clarity and the drive that can come from saturating oxygen in your system as a result of a specific breathing method when it comes to like time to perform. So that's really really interesting.
Are you familiar? Oh, I put it up here. Are you familiar with the oxygen advantage method? No. An Irish guy, Patrick McKeown, in Dublin, actually. In Galway. So I did that training. I've done a number of different trainings. I've gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole with the breath work. But what actually a lot of the protocols in here also helps from a sports performer perspective. So you explained something which is true, because you can breathe into your back, you can strengthen your core, and that helps you to brace. But another big thing is around cardio. So by nasal breathing, by breathing deep, by extending your exhales, and a number of different techniques that we use in the protocol, you can not only perform better from a cardio perspective, but also your recovery speeds up. So a lot of athletes, and you'll see a lot of athletes starting to catch on to this now, right? So they're breathing with their nose, they're doing breath hold exercises, which is like a simulation of altitude training. And that has massive improvements. I've tried it myself. I'm in a lot. I love endurance sport, and the last couple of years I've focused on long distance running, and I was able to run at the same speed or faster, breathing through my nose. And before that, to get to that speed, I was dumping air, mouth breathing, which also means that now my heart rate is much lower, so I can go for a lot longer because I'm expending less energy, and obviously because of that, my recovery the next day is much better.
That's mad. Because you think when you're breathing through your nose, it's not as big as your mouth, so you're not getting as much air in. But obviously,
there's an adaptation period, right? So you're running mouth breathing. You start to run purely nasal.
Okay.
Your speed drops, and then you'll see your speed as your body adapts pick back up, and then it could go at the same level, if not higher, to what you were running at. But it's the same thing, what I was explaining, right? Yes, you take more in, but you also dump more CO2 out.
Right.
So therefore, you're delivering less oxygen to your muscles every time you breathe. And if you're breathing, especially when we're training, you're breathing at a much higher rate. So every single time, that's less oxygen to your muscles, which means you need to breathe in more air. It's a vicious cycle, basically.
Yeah, I'd imagine your lactic threshold is not as good then as well. So you're getting
Correct.
that heavy legs then
Correct.
straight away. I mean, in personal trainers will often talk about EPOC, the excessive pulse oxygen consumption, which is basically, you'll know this, but I'll just explain for the listeners, where you're breathing, but the amount of oxygen in your system hasn't caught up to your activity level yet, which is why generally the first kind of 5 minutes is always a bit of a struggle, but once you get over that, you settle into that rhythm, and it feels a bit more comfortable. But what you're saying is you can probably reduce that initial discomfort and just settle into your rhythm a lot quicker with that specific breathing pattern, because your oxygen levels are catching up to your activity level a lot faster.
Yeah,
is that
and
accurate?
The biggest difference is actually not necessarily the oxygen levels, because when I say I need some air, I need some oxygen, right? We tend to take that deep breath. The oxygen level is not the problem, right? It's still at plus 90%, right? Oxygen saturation in your body. What the issue is there is that the CO2 is built up, so the carbon dioxide is built up. The receptors is saying, alarm, we've got too much CO2. But the problem is it's saying alarm at a level where it shouldn't alarm. It's like your smoke alarm gets overly sensitive, right? And every little bit of thing happens in the kitchen, it goes off all the time, right? So, and also if you think about that, the alarm analogy is you're constantly on alert then. Right? So this is why it's important. And, we've kind of gone down the sports route, but it's important for your well-being. It's important for your brain function. It's important for your performance at work. There's so many areas. Your sleep, hugely, right? So mouth breathing, again, if you're mouth breathing during the day, you're training yourself to breathe through your mouth, means that you're breathing through your mouth at night. If you start to tape your mouth, your deep sleep can double.
Really?
Yeah. So the quality of your sleep increases greatly. For exactly the same reason, right? Because you're breathing in a much healthier pattern. Also, the nose has abilities to filter the air, remove humidity from the air. It warms up the air. So a lot of the time when you wake up and your throat is dry or is sore, you've got a slight pain, and you kind of, I need to drink lots of water. It's because your throat is dried up because... But if I'm breathing in and out through my nose, I don't have that issue. There's a reason why we're supposed to breathe through the nose.
Yeah, and we forget.
We definitely forget.
We definitely do. Just let's pivot back to the run up to let's call it burnout, because that it's just I'm fascinated to explore that a little bit more, because very often I think those around us recognize it and they try to stop us from running into that wall, but for whatever reason, we just can't hear it at the time, or we just don't want to hear it. Were you getting signals from different people in your life at that time to go, this is a little bit out of character, we're a little bit worried? And again, we just think we've just got no option here because this is work. Yeah. This is part of my identity. I need to do X, Y, and Z in order to provide. Did that occur for you, or was it something else?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I had that from close friends. I had that from my family, particularly my parents, and obviously my wife as well. And, you know, I think the same way our brain is too busy to notice what's happening in our body, our brain, our mind is too busy to really truly understand and appreciate what the people that are closest to us are saying to us at that moment in time, right? You know, so sure. when they were raising these things with me, one, you kind of, my defense mechanism was, it's not going to happen to me. I got this, right? You know, I'll be fine. I mean, I got to the stage where I'd gone past that, and I was admitting that there was an issue there. But the thing was, just another 1 or 2 years, and then I'll slow down, you know. So again, that's I believe now that's a complete defense mechanism on my part. But those are the people that come to you and tell you, right? I had a friend who said that he raised it with me a few times. Clearly, I didn't listen. And he told me after the fact that he purposely started to distance himself from me. And the reason was that he said it's not because he was worried about me, you know, it was because he said, when we met, the only thing I spoke about was work. And he said, like, you know, we're friends, I wanted to talk about other things, or, you know, whatever. And basically I'd become boring as a friend to him, right? Which I 100% understand and appreciate now. Yeah. But that was one of the things after the fact that really made me stop and think to go, wow, yeah, it doesn't just have an effect on me. It really does have an effect on those people around you, right? You know, and look, let's be honest about it, right? I'm having a lot less arguments with my wife since I've managed to deal with the stress, because also a big thing when you're in that fight or flight is that you're responding all the time, right? So there's a self-defense mechanism there, right? So or should I say you're reacting all the time. Once you learn to manage your nervous system, you start to respond instead of reacting. So you're much more constructive, you're much more grounded in the way in which you reply. So your personal relationships will benefit from it too.
And so you're out on the run, if I can take you back to that place, and you feel, I guess it was a tingle or something going down your arm. Talk me through what the sort of initial symptoms are, because again, it's one of those things where speed to respond is really important, so that people can kind of recognize this maybe in themselves. Yeah.
I mean, as I mentioned, it's been a while that I've had, you know, chest pains, tightness in the chest, you know, forgetfulness and those things. That specific morning, so I'd just come back from a High Rocks training camp in Cyprus on the Saturday. Sunday morning, I got up pretty early and drove my parents to the airport. And then every Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, we have a group of friends who we go for a run and a dip in the sea, right? And it's a bit of a men's club, right? You know, we go there and we have a chat and we support each other when needed. When I got down before the run, all I can describe it to is I felt nearly like my sight and my hearing was augmented or distorted. I'm not quite sure how to describe it, to be honest, right? You know, but I felt I was in a little bit of the matrix. But of course I said, yeah, look, I'm just tired, right? Just been to this High Rocks camp, woke up early to bring the parents to the airport. I'll take it easy and we'll trot along. A couple of minutes into the run, a friend of mine asked me, you know, so how was Cyprus? And I tried to explain to them. And the first thing I noticed was, it's like my words were starting to slur a little bit. And then I started to find it difficult to find words. So I went to tell him about a specific dinner we were at, and I couldn't find the word restaurant. This one stayed with me. I clearly remember trying to go, I know that word, but I can't find it. So one of the guys then obviously made a joke and said, we had a Catalan friend with us, because I'm living in Barcelona at the moment. So he said, look, so as a result, I was speaking in Spanish, and he said, maybe you're too tired for your Spanish, let's switch to English. And I said, actually, that's a good idea. That's probably what it is. And when I switched to English, the interesting thing is the same exact words I couldn't find in Spanish, I now couldn't find in English.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And that's when I started to get a little bit worried. But of course, you know, maybe because I'm a man, said nothing. I said, guys, look, I'm just a bit too tired. I just let me catch my breath. You guys carry on chatting and I'll run along with you, right? But basically, let's take the attention off my story, right? And I tried to just kind of catch my breath with that. And that's when I started to notice tingling on my face. And then I got really worried. And instead of saying, guys, I think I'm in trouble, let's go back, help me out, I said, I'm too tired, guys. I'm not going to do the run today. I'm going to go back to the car. So I left my friends and I ran back to my car by myself. I was only about 2 kilometers, I would say, away from the car at this stage. And that's when I started to panic inside, right? I kind of worried at the time. I didn't know what it was, but I said, this is serious. And I remember running down the seafront in Sitges and spotting a person in front of me and going, okay, if anything happens, I'm going to go and grab that person. And then once I ran past that person, because of course I didn't start walking, I kept running. Once I ran past that person, I picked the next person, my next target, and go, okay, now if anything happens, I'm going to go and grab that person to ask for help, basically, right?
Yeah.
The other really weird thing that happened is I always wear a run belt and I have a phone with me. That day, for some reason, I left my phone in the car. So I also had the added worry is if anything happens, I can't even ring my wife. Anyway, I'm still here to tell the story, so we won't get too dramatic about it. I get to the car and I go, well, now I can't ring Olga because one, I kept thinking, but again, the words weren't coming to me. And I knew that I was slurring my words as well at this stage, my words. So I basically had Olga's phone number on the phone ready to press as I was driving, and I was holding the phone in my hand in case I had to call her. But when I got home, I went to tell Olga what happened, and she couldn't understand me, and she was like, what's wrong with you? Because my words weren't coming out clearly. Wow. Now, interestingly, we rang the emergency number. They said, bring you into this specific hospital, blah, blah. By the time we got to the hospital, and as we were driving in, my words started to, my slurring started to improve. Yeah. And I started to come around again. So long story short, they rushed me in, they did all these checks, and basically what the doctors now believe is that thanks to my age and my fitness level, somehow I was able to manage the mini stroke. And that's why it's not as impressive calling it a mini stroke, but that's why they call it a mini stroke, because it seems like I was able to manage it. And there was no long-term impact on it. Now, that took 6 months of tests to make sure, because they were nervous. They basically said, because of what happened, the symptoms and everything else, they couldn't understand why they couldn't trace it. Okay. And they were worried then, does that mean it's something more serious? Right. But luckily, it doesn't sound like it was. So I'm now completely clear. I've got no risk. So obviously for 6 months, I couldn't do any sports. There was all these restrictions, and now every restriction is off the table. That was 3 years ago. Last year I ran 100k in the mountains, so I think I'm back to normal now.
Good stuff. What about the aftermath of that then? So when the dust settles, obviously a conversation needs to be had. It must have been a very scary period for your wife and your family. What how did you just tackle the aftermath of that when the dust settles and be like, right, how I've been living, this is a pretty strong warning shot across the bow. How do I recalibrate this then? Because we all say, work is work, but things are more important. But I always feel like we know that consciously, but we don't know it subconsciously until something like that happens, and it's a big hard hit of the reset button. Talk to me about that.
So to be completely honest, looking back now, Ross, I think I don't think we struggled with the aftermath, in the sense that I think our response was, and I say I think because looking back, I don't see that tough period, right? Looking back, I think we responded and said, we got lucky. This was a stronger signal than the signals I've been receiving the last 2 to 3 years. We now need to respond to that signal, right? Which was a decision to give up my job. And the 6 months that followed, even with the weekly trips to the doctors, actually was probably one of the best 6 months of my life, right? Because I was so present, because that was the only thing that mattered, was to make sure that I was safe and healthy. And I spent so much time with my kids. And obviously there was no more travel for work and things like that. So I was really, really present and focused with the family, and that's the biggest thing that I take with me from those 6 months. The hardest part was, and you touched upon it, was letting my employer know that I needed to stop working, right? And I think the hardest part, why it was the hardest part, is because I tied so much of my identity to work. So earlier you mentioned this idea of buckets, and I always, when I'm speaking to someone in the coaching capacity, we talk about the buckets in your life and the fact that we tend to pour way too much into the work bucket, which means that all the other buckets are empty. And if anything happens to that bucket of work, you don't have enough substance in the other buckets to support it. So that's where people burn out, have issues, and, potentially can have a big knock-on effect to their relationships and everything else, family included. So I basically went from over-pouring and that work bucket overflowing into pouring it into everything else. And I found that hugely, hugely beneficial. But, the issue or the difficulty with telling my employer was just purely because of that identity. So you're kind of going through an identity crisis. So I'm like, no, I'm the VP of sales. I'm the head of sales, right? I'm this person with this career, and these are the expectations. And it's always a response to other people's expectations of you. Right? Which is really just a perception of what their expectations are. Because as this friend said to me, he didn't give a crap about my work, right? In fact, it was the one thing he didn't want to talk to me about anymore, right? But my perception was that people saw me as that person, and therefore all of a sudden I wasn't that person anymore, which means, who am I? There's a little bit of a crisis going on there. And I think that there's so many of us that are overpouring into that bucket, and so many of us identify as to who we are. At the beginning of this call, when I introduced myself, I started with saying that I'm a husband and I'm a father. Most of us will say I'm the VP of sales, I'm this and that. That answer that I gave at the beginning is a conscious thing that I started to do, right? So when people ask me who I do or what I am, I purposely try not to start with what I'm doing from a work perspective.
That's a very, very interesting take that I think a lot of people need to hear more about, or more of, to kind of make that association, because you're absolutely right. We attach so much of our identity to not who we are, but what we do. And it's purely something that we're doing to, for most of us, it's to pay the bills, and we'll kind of fool our narrative. And there's people like a little bit of prestige as well, the title, and it's the ego. It's the blooming ego. But that kind of career transition, how did you navigate that identity crisis then? Was it just lots of conversations at home? Was it lots of conversations with yourself? How did you kind of get yourself to the place where you can just let go of kind of the ego and the identity, or the part of the identity that's attached to work? And was that painful, or did you find that okay?
It was actually one conversation. It was a conversation and a warning, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So when all this happened, the conversation at home was, okay, you need to stop working, right? But the doctors said you need to stop working. So I now need to inform my employer that I need to stop working. And a day went by, 2 days went by, a full week went by, and every day at the end of work, I'll go and ask, did you tell your boss? I said, no, we're working on this thing, so I'll tell him tomorrow. So I was pushing it back, right? At home, I was, tomorrow is the day I'm going to definitely do it. But then I was never actually pulling through on it. But that's because I was scared, right? I was scared of letting go. But Olga said to me, she said, look, I came off a call once, I remember, and this was like a week after or something, and it was a particularly high pressured call, and I couldn't stop my hands from shaking coming off this call. Okay. So she said, if you don't tell your boss now, I'm going to call your boss and I'm going to resign you, right? So that was an even scarier thought. But what she said to me, she said, you're not good to me dead, So I prefer you at home, not work. Because my reaction was always about what I'm going to do. You know, I'm supposed to be working. You know, the family should take priority. But that was all deflection on my side, right? I was pretending that my worry was I'm the provider, or I want to be the provider. That innate thing that we have. So she said, "Look, you're no good to me dead. So you need to resign," right? So that was the conversation. And the warning that followed that was, the agreement was for 6 months, because she knows me and she knows I'm a planner. She said, "You're not allowed to talk to anybody about what you're going to do next. You're not allowed to talk about it. You're not allowed to think about it, because you need to think about yourself and you need to get yourself right. After the 6 months, then you can get yourself right." So basically what she was saying is, don't go out the next day and start to have conversations with people, right, about what you're going to do next, what you're going to do next. Which in a way was even scarier, because of course that identity crisis, I wanted to have a story to be able to tell people, right? If you called me and said, "Hey Ciarán, I heard that you had to give up work. Are you okay? What happened? Blah, blah." I would love to have been able to say, "Yeah, Ross, this happened, but don't worry about it, because I'm going to go do this great other thing in 6 months' time." I now didn't have that story to tell you when you called me, right? So I literally had to have that complete detachment from what I did, as you said, rather than what I am. So in those 6 months, it just basically allowed me to, I guess, you know, without sounding too woo-woo, to reconnect with myself. And as I said, very much reconnect with my family, because I do remember a feeling, and there's this specific day sitting at a desk asking myself, what the hell am I doing? And having the feeling that I sat at a desk for 12, maybe more hours a day, and that my family were living a life beside me, but not connected to me. So as if they had their family circle and I was just outside that family circle, and my job was to provide for their life and allow them to do what it is that they were doing. And now I truly believe that I'm back in the circle, right? You know, and it's a weird thing, because it was never like, some people have issues because, you know, a fight, an argument with their partner. Like, don't get me wrong, we were fighting all the time, right? Like every other couple, right? But it never got to a stage where it was serious enough to for that to be something that stopped me. But I do remember this feeling of detachment from my family, which is it's one of the warning signs of, if you feel detached from anything, family, friends, your job, what you're doing, your sense of purpose, you're burnt out, right? And this is the problem we have today, is that we talk about, I fear like I'm burning out. If you fear you're burning out, you're burnt out. Right. And the good news is that it's not too late, right? I think we over dramatize this burning out thing, right? You know, there's things that we can do to help us reset our nervous system and little by little improve our sleep, improve our relationship, improve our connections. And the interesting thing is, when we work with leaders, is that we tend to say that a reset nervous system, because people say, "Well, what are you telling me? Do I need to work less?" I said, don't think about it as in working less or more. What we're going to do using coaching tools and breathwork is we're going to help you to focus working on what matters most, which in turn means that you're going to work less on the things that don't matter as much. So in theory, yeah, you could work less hours, but your performance is going to increase over time. Because that's what people are worried about.
How did you, I mean, for me, like, and again, I think this is a male thing around the financial security of the household and all of this kind of stuff. And then you've got 6 months where no planning, no income, basically. How did you sort of detach from that? You know, I have to do this in order to ensure the financial security. And because it's a weird sort of a narrative, I think, that we tell ourselves, especially about being that provider role and being on the outside of the family circle. We're nearly telling ourselves, I'm doing the right thing because the lights are on, the bills 100%. Are paid, there's food on the table, there's clothes on their back. So now I might not be necessarily meeting their emotional needs, but I'm taking the physical boxes. And as part of my identity, that's really important. Whereas now I'm looking after their emotional needs a lot better, but there may not be the same degree of financial security. And that's to your point about the 3 buckets, it's kind of a hard reset for people. How did you kind of square that in your head?
Yeah, and you're 100% right. I mean, that's the story that we tell ourselves to justify our actions, right? You know, and my wife, I remember, always used to say a thing that only really landed with me now that I'm a little bit more present and spending time with the kids and stuff. And she used to say, it's not, because I used to bash myself around the travel and being away from the kids and stuff like that. And she said, it's not the amount of hours that you spend with the kids. It's you have to be present when you're with the kids. So the travel wasn't the issue for me. The issue was that when I was back, I was either thinking or potentially even trying to do emails on the phone while I was with the kids.
Yep.
So it's a great way, which I think I use it all the time, because with people that have, because we do get this sense of guilt, right, when we're pouring into that bucket of work in terms of our family. And the reality is we don't need to be at home 24 hours a day to be a good father, a good husband, right? In the case of us men, it's when you are there, are you really present? Do you have the capability and ability to put work aside? Work on whatever it is, right? It could be the news, it could be the sports news, it could be whatever that is. What was your direct question, Ross? I'm after going on another tangent.
It was around parsing that you know, identity of being that provider and feeling like you're doing the right thing, versus actually, if you recalibrate that, you don't need to be so worried about the finances. We'll figure that out, but I'm going to meet their emotional needs a lot better. Because I mean, even in terms of how my own brain used to be wired, it was very much finance first. When the finance is secured, I'll deal with that other stuff. And I was very kind of waterfall in my thinking, which was the wrong way to go about it. And I was just wondering how you kind of navigate that.
I think there's two things there. One is my personal situation. I was in a very lucky position because Olga and I have been quite shrewd, I guess, with the money. So we always made sure that there was enough for a rainy day. So and she's an accountant, right? So she was able to show me very clearly, black and white, is look, this is the runway that you have. If you don't earn money for 6 months, we still are absolutely fine, right? You know, so I had that reassurance that, and I appreciate it was a privileged position to be able to take the 6 months and not be worried about that, to say that we have provided enough up to now that I can now take this time off, right? And Olga was obviously is working, so that also helped. We still had an income coming in as a family. It's a hard one, Ross, right? And probably one of the hardest things, because society is telling us that we need more. You need the new car, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to go on holidays, right? There's, needless to say, that we need a lot less than we think we need to live, right? And that's even before we start to cut things down, right? But one of the biggest things that I work with in the coaching business is, a lot of people say to me, I cannot give up work. You know, I cannot take 6 months off as you did. And this is why I strongly believe, Ross, that in order to manage, if you're burning out, or as I said, if you're burnt out, because if you think you're burning out, you're probably already burnt out. Sure. I genuinely believe that you can come back to a place of balance without taking the 6 months off, knowing what I know now. And that is what I'm trying to pass on and what I'm trying to share with people as part of the coaching practice that we have.
Gotcha. And let's talk about that coaching practice. I know we touched on it earlier on, but could you share with me around the decision to go down that route specifically, right? So you've been in sales, you've been leading teams, you've been doing all of this kind of stuff, and then you've had this life-changing event. Did it, in a sense, help kind of ignite a passion for a different area, and you're like, do you know what, it's kind of the holy grail where I can get paid for something that I'm incredibly passionate about, and in that sense it's not work, it's not stressful because I'm in control, you know. If a client goes away, then big deal, client goes away, we'll get a different one. How did that transition work for you?
I think it was twofold. One is, I wanted to see, could I make a living working for myself, so that I dictated what I did. And again, it's, you know, I've often thought about, you know, what was the reasoning of that, because as I said, is, you know, I don't blame my employers or my job or the environment, because we need to be responsible for our state. But this was a decision that I made. So there's two things that I work on mainly, Ross. One is the go-to-market and sales advisory work, right? Because I work for 20 years doing that, right? So it's something that I'm passionate about, something that I've built a lot of time building experience in, and I enjoy working with early stage founders, helping them in that space, right? The coaching business is something that I'm doing with actually an ex-colleague of mine and a friend of mine, Samuel, it's called Team Coaching, Team Academy. And we started doing team coaching, and then we also now do leadership coaching, and we develop coaching programs. And Samuel has built under the brand this brilliant online leadership community called We Lead. And the whole theory around that is that we want to help leaders lead in a different way. That different way is twofold. One is more human-centered, right? So we don't have to be as authoritative as maybe we thought we had to be when I started in the leadership space. I'm the leader, you do as I told. I'm the leader, I know everything. I'm the leader, then, I need to know, right? Your expectation of me is that I need to know. So it's a bit more of a human approach to leadership, let's say. But also we have this idea of self-leadership, because until you look after yourself, you cannot be the best leader that you can be. And that's where the nervous system regulation stuff comes in, right? So if I'm leading from a place of burnout, I cannot, one, be effective, and I'm also not going to be a nice person to work with, right? Which is important, because employee attrition and employee engagement and all that depends directly on that leader. So we help people to better understand themselves as an individual, which is understanding the other buckets in your life. And then we go deep on the using coaching tools to help them become a better leader. And that's more operationally a better leader, right? What are the things that create a better leader? Yeah.
A little bit, probably a little bit more on emotional intelligence and again, picking up signals from your team, even in terms of how they're doing.
And that's one area, but there's also, we go even into areas like communication, time management, goal setting, managing conflicts. Like, what we did is we took most of the most relevant topics from all the one-to-one coaching that we're doing. And we've built a program. It's an online program we deliver with a small group, and we mix coaching and mentoring in that. And it's fantastic. It's fun for us because you're working with a group of people on a weekly basis, and you're bringing them through this journey, and then we try to create a space where those people can bring their own personal experience into the program as well. So they're not just learning from us, they're actually learning from each other as well. And now obviously the next step is that they join the online community that Samuela just launched, and they can continue that journey. And it's amazing to see, because they've known each other and they've built a relationship through the leadership program, when now they move on to this online leadership program, that connection remains, and you can see the interactions between the people that have been on this journey together.
Amazing. That's amazing, Mark. Really, really interesting. One last question. How do you make sure that you don't slip back into old habits?
Well, one thing is I allow myself to slip into old habits. What I mean by that is that at the beginning, I used to really go, I can't believe it. I've done this, I've done that. I should know better, right? I've missed my breathwork this morning, or whatever that is, whatever practice I put in place. I now go, okay, it happens, right? And what I try to do is, with everything, I try to say, it's okay to slip up. Don't make it happen 2 days in a row. Right? So if I'm implementing a journaling practice, I make sure that, if it doesn't happen this morning, it's not a big deal. Like this morning I did nothing, right? So I told you I just came back from the US yesterday. I had an 11-hour sleep. I literally just got up, brought the kids to school, and then sat down and started to do a little bit of work. So it doesn't have to be every single day, but I'll probably do something later on. So move my morning practice to the evening, and then tomorrow we'll get back on the horse and go again. The reality is, especially if you're burnt out, Ross, is that if a coach or mentor, whoever, that you should do these 5 things, you're already overwhelmed. Your system is already on overdrive. So what we try to do when we coach people through it is we try, what are the things that we can stop doing, what are the things that we can remove. And if there's only one thing that I'm going to ask you is try to sit still for 2 minutes whenever you get a chance during the day, and just start with that. What we see in practice is, with these small little practices, are how do you, like, if they start with 2 minutes, they will start to see the benefit, and they will tell you, hey, Ciarán, I actually did 5 minutes this week. right? And instead of you pushing them and giving them targets, which is what we're used to doing in our life, you get them to realize the benefit, and therefore they drive. What else? What else can I do? Where else can I, a lot of the things, as I said, we get them to do a lot of prioritization. We get them to look at their values. We do the wheel of life, which is looking at your entire life, vision and values and things like that. And where are you out of sync with those things? And very quickly you will see where you're spending time, where you should not be spending time.
That makes sense. We're just about at time. Ciarán, that was an amazing conversation. Thank you very much for sharing all of that story. I think it's going to, again, I said at the start, I think it's going to hit a lot of people in a way that they maybe weren't expecting, because even from my own personal experience, it's a lot of aspects of that mirrored my own. As part of the signing off, I'm going to leave the final word to you in terms of what message you want to leave with the audience. What do you want to people to take away from this conversation, if nothing else?
I'm going to keep it very simple, because a lot of people have reached out to me after hearing my story to say, I'm having the same symptoms. What can I do? I can't give up work. And there's two things, right? There's one is, most of us are in that situation, right? So you're not alone. I know that sounds like a little bit of a cliche. So that should hopefully give you more of a courage to speak up and to share it, if it's not with a loved one, with a friend. And then, do try and find those couple of minutes a day. First thing in the morning is the best, because once we start to go into the day, the mind starts to get busy, and it's a lot harder then to find that stillness and that quietness, right?
Sure.
But I would like to invite anyone that listens to us today is to just start to practice first thing in the morning, sit somewhere quietly for 2 or 3 minutes, just noticing your breath and trying to see what's happening in your body, right? Where's the tightness? Where's the tension? Where's any potential emotions? Like some people, because they haven't listened to their body for so long, 2 or 3 minutes is enough to maybe bring up some sort of emotion. Don't try to figure out what is it or why is it. Just breathe through it if it comes up, right? And I invite anybody to try and read into a little bit more around breathwork and maybe Breathe. James Nestor's book is a good book that people could read into, because it's more practical around the health implications of breathing and what it can do for us.
Where can people find you? Your website? Do you got Instagram?
Yeah, obviously I'm on LinkedIn. They can find me there. Maybe where I share a little bit more specific around nervous system regulation and breathwork is on Instagram. So it's Ciarán_breathwork, quite self-explanatory. And that's where I share a lot of my stories. I share workshops, events that we run as well, if people want to dig a little bit deeper into that.
Perfect. Ciarán, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a million, Ross. It's been a pleasure.
Hello. If you found this conversation helpful, we would really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up, or maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Oh, and if there's a topic that you'd like us to explore in a future episode of the FitBoss Podcast, why don't you let us know in the comments? We would love to hear your ideas. Thank you for listening.